Okay, now I'm good to go. Okay, yeah, I was setting something up on my YouTube because I was trying to do like an introduction.
Mhm.
Um, oh,
So
but
are
yeah,
people debating today or?
yeah, I'm doing like 1v1s with people.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm getting back into the weekly debates with people. So got that TikTok running, YouTube, did my intro.
What's next? Date night?
When's the next debate night? Oh, currently I am working on the next debate night. I've got people for it, and I'm setting it up for February 21st. I actually recently kind of, that. Um, no, that's set. I actually recently got some people to agree on a topic. I need to write that in my notes.
What's
Um,
the topic?
I have a 2v2 on is the Christian God moral? And I happen to agree on the topic, but I do need to verify with like one more person for that 2v2, and then it should be like good to
Who's the runner-up for this?
go. It's gonna be Autumn and Jay versus J Rob, and um, if he agrees to it, J Rob and Luna the Pig. Yeah.
So who's refereeing this debate?
Me and
Get slurms.
OG Kylo. Me and OG
Oh.
Kylo are co-hosting it, but it's gonna happen on OG Kylo's account.
Hmm.
You know, G is the
What up, cuz?
what's up? I just locked in your topic, um, and you guys are like good to go. I just have to verify with like J Rob's partner. Uh,
What was the
yeah,
topic again?
is the Christian God moral?
Oh, okay. Is the Christian God moral? I
Yeah.
thought it was just.
Do you want it to be just?
Um, yeah, yeah. We should probably go for just. Like, it just has more substance.
Oh, okay.
Like, that moral thing when it comes to God can be like, I don't know, it can be argued off by Christians to say like God has a different set of morals or some shit like that. But yeah, the evidential problem of justice would probably be a good argument or a better argument than the evidential problem of morals when it comes to God. I think.
Okay. But cool. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm getting back into like doing like these 1v1 debates, but I kind of want to do them. I want to be a better debater, and I guess the more I read, the more topics I'll be discussing. But um, this topic is inspired by like the Alex O'Connor thing that he did on Jubilee, where it was him versus 25 Christians. And like he made like some good points, but I do need to go and like take notes on the debate. I watched it with some friends, but I need to thoroughly go over it.
That's interesting.
That sounds very commercial. This topic brought to you by.
And so in the comments, I see Callie Robinson saying mankind is cruel. They are the reason the earth is the way that it is. I do agree. Um, some of the evil that happens on earth is due to men, but there are also like, well, we're not talking about evil, we're talking about suffering. Some of the suffering that happens on earth is caused by like men and like the bad decisions that they make, but there's a lot of suffering that isn't caused by men. Like one thing in particular is like volcanoes erupt because they need to release pressure from within the crust, and like that pressure is being shot out onto the earth, right? And that causes like a lot of suffering to people who live nearby those locations. Like, why does that stuff happen? Like, couldn't God have created the earth without the need to shoot out pressure from its center and spread hot lava into neighboring individuals that might be living around those locations. You have
Hawaii.
things like what?
Hawaii.
Yeah, like Hawaii, they get like eruptions. And also like those volcanic eruptions also affect like animals too. And like what did animals do to like deserve to be burned alive by like hot steaming lava or breathe in any of those gases?
Yeah,
Um,
I think humans, they tend, when they have these conversations, they tend to be very humanistic about the topics, and they just kind of forget that there are other creatures living on this planet with us that suffer, like during forest fires and volcanoes, like you mentioned, tsunamis, like meteors falling from the sky, and wiping out an entire ecological system.
yeah,
I guess we kind of forget. Oh, I don't think it's so much that we forget. I think it's like we're very conceited when it comes to humans, and we think like all the problems should be directed to the human experience, and we just forget about the animals.
yeah. But yeah, but also that was kind of one of the good points that Alex O'Connor brought up, like talking about like animal suffering and not so much like human suffering, because the Christian could always say that like humans are um, suffering like as a way to like develop character, and God wants to see us develop our character. But hey, Kason, you know what this is about. I think we watched it the other day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to do it because I thought it would be interesting.
What are you doing?
This topic.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even read it. Okay, I see it now.
We watched the debate the other day. That's what this is based off of. I thought it would be a good topic. Dr. Truth.
Uh,
Actually, while I'm doing this, I was thinking like I could be like writing on my laptop like the problems I have with Christianity because I've been meaning to do that so I can sort of look into Christianity and see if it has any solutions to all those problems that I have or criticisms I have of Christianity. So I could probably like do that while I'm doing this. But yeah, let me take a quick. But what do you got for me today, Dr. Truth?
no, I just heard you talking about natural disasters, which, there's obviously something that we struggle with. But you're right about the volcanic eruptions to release pressure because we have a molten core that gives us a magnetic field that protects us from a lot of harmful radiation.
Yeah.
One thought. Um, I mean, some of the things are just the consequences of natural laws, as well. But those are all things that we can respond to, rise above, have compassion, um, help others, that sort of thing.
Um. Okay, so you're saying like we can like rise above like volcanoes erupting, and it can be something that develops like character. That's kind of the right
Or you,
thing.
if you have a disease or something, the way you respond to it, it can be an opportunity to rise above it and show this, be inspiration.
Oh, you're breaking
And
up
if
a
someone
little
is
bit.
sick or someone is suffering, oh, sorry, if someone is suffering, then you can show compassion.
Um, I mean, I guess yeah. For some, like it might be an opportunity to like rise above it and like develop character. But like, what about like the individuals who weren't able to like escape the lava that was being like um spurted out by the volcano, and like they didn't really have like an opportunity to like rise above it, or they're just simply incapable of rising above it and making the best out of it. They just end up dying from the volcano, either that or it's like poisonous gases or the lava that it shoots out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not only
I
that, but
wouldn't say rise above it. No, no,
one
I was talking
volcano
about.
erupting one volcano erupting wreaks havoc, on the entire ecological system, like from the volcano erupting and the shockwave that's produced by it causing tsunamis, underwater fissures to open and like destroy underwater ecological systems. And then you have the remnants of like the ash going up into the atmosphere and then raining down as acid rain on some other community that's 500 miles away, which causes the water to become brackish or oxidized, causing the fish to die, causing the overpopulation of flies, causing an overpopulation of frogs. The insects that are trapped in the upheaval of the ash going up into the air can also be deposited 500 and some odd miles away, such as locusts, which we all know locusts wreak havoc on farmland as they pretty much eat everything they touch, and we're talking like millions of locusts that can be deposited across a widespread portion of land somewhere like a distance away from where the actual volcano erupted. So it's not just the lava; it's everything that is included in just that one natural event that causes widespread suffering of not just humans but animals and ecological systems also.
What if I did? Oh, okay. That makes it more interesting.
I think Coco, we have to, and Kason may have something he wants to, jump in and say, but I think we have to look at the eschatological aspect to it in terms of the person that is unalived in a volcanic eruption or tsunami or hurricane or something like that.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity, and if universalism is true, then everyone goes to heaven. We don't. That's one possibility. But in heaven, you've got this eternal bliss that when we look back on that momentary suffering, it may be that in the presence of God, that is considered uh, worthwhile overall to have lived the life that they lived.
Hmm. Wait, actually, wait. Make that argument again one more time and say what you said.
You have to consider heaven in the equation, the eschatological aspect to it, the future. That if and there's one possibility that universalism may be true, where everyone ends up in heaven, but it may not be. But for those that are in heaven, there is this presence of this incredible goodness, and assuming God exists in heaven, there's this total bliss and identification with Christ's sufferings. And and when we look back at this temporary suffering on earth, that overall they can still consider the earth, the life was worth living based on this eternal bliss with God. And animals perhaps may even have some sort of afterlife too. Trent Doherty has talked about that. That's certainly a possibility.
Well, yeah, but like none of this we like know for sure. We would just have to like assume, given the
Right.
information we
It's just
have.
possibilities, yeah. But I think that, heaven would definitely, for us, that if God exists, Christianity is true, and heaven is real, then that's definitely something in the equation for us, in our view.
Yeah. So essentially so the first thing that you said was that the volcano could be like an opportunity for people to like grow in character, but then there's going to be like people who are unable to grow in their character or due to this volcano because like they might have the inability to like escape the effects of the volcano and be burned alive. So let's say that some this volcano thing ends up being like a character growth for them, right? But then for those that it isn't a character growth, you're saying
Yeah, I
that
didn't say that was for everybody. I mean, there's some people that don't have the opportunity for that, but there are people that can reach out. We can reach out and help people that have been hurt in a hurricane or lost their homes. There's an opportunity for compassion of some of these higher goods as a result of, Swinburne talks about a world where God stops all evil. There are no natural disasters. It is just more of a kindergarten world. It's not the opportunity for real hard decisions of, am I going to show compassion and help this person? Am I going to rise above it? and that we can make meaningful decisions to help others as a result of these things that are, of course, I agree with you. The suffering is horrible.
You know, so like for those people who like they don't get to grow in character, like the option for them is if they believed in God, then like they get heaven and all of that was worth it. Like burning alive in lava was like worth it.
Well, that is one possibility, that with eternal bliss, that momentary suffering seems kind of small compared to what they end up with.
Yeah. Don't you think that like if God has like all knowledge, let's say that he knows like future propositions and he knows that certain people are going to be unable to like grow in character from this experience, couldn't he have made like the suffering a little bit like less? And then maybe these people would like earn heaven and it would be like worth it. Like why is like burning in lava like necessary? Like why must this occur essentially? if he if he knew that like people were going to burn in lava and it wasn't going to develop their character, it seems like what's the point of having this excess, unnecessary, purposeless suffering? Like, what's the purpose of the people who are burned up because they are unable to escape?
The point is not just for you to grow in character, but for others that can reach out to those that have suffered, and then they will have an opportunity in heaven to experience eternal bliss. It's not about everyone has to grow in character, because as you said, someone that immediately is unalived may not have that opportunity. I agree with you. But it
Yeah.
also, that some of these consequences can just be from the laws of physics and having a real world where we can have moral agents that can interact with each other, hopefully make good decisions, respond to each other during natural disasters, and the molten core protecting us from, giving us a magnetic field to protect us, may just be part of the consequences of the natural laws as well.
Couldn't
Yeah, I
God
mean,
like
God can be trying to establish a relationship, the most genuine relationship possible, and an aspect of that is more suffering. So it just gets so murky waters. Like we'd actually have to really uncover if that's actually establishing a more meaningful relationship for saint development. And the expectation is that most people won't be in the kingdom to begin with. The heavy minority are going to
wait
be in
so
heaven.
so God needs people to burn in
Well, and
volcanoes
also in your prompt,
for saint development? Or
there's no need,
Well,
but
establish a
your
genuine relationship with
your
creatures.
prompt.
go ahead.
What's your argument, Coco? What's your argument that your prompt is true, that God is unmoved by mass suffering? What do you mean by unmoved? And what's your argument that
I would say that God is typically described as being like all loving, like he cares for like all of his creations, and he's supposed to be like a loving father for like his children. And typically, what I would think of a father is if he saw his children suffering, there is going to be some suffering that is beneficial for growth, but there is some suffering that's just a little bit like unnecessary and doesn't really develop growth. Hence, how maybe a volcanic eruption might happen and some people might grow from it, but some people are not going to make it out right. A loving father, if he saw that his creation was undergoing some kind of suffering that isn't going to develop them and is just purely harmful, he would kind of like step in to prevent that suffering if he had the ability to do so. So when we're talking about like God, maybe you can make the argument that like some suffering is going to be beneficial for like character growth, but in the areas where it's not beneficial for character growth, God has all the ability to step in and do something to intervene or to like make life a little bit better for some.
No,
But
even the
instead,
instances where he doesn't
wait,
step in and
hold on.
intervene.
But instead, like what we see is we see people who are undergoing suffering that doesn't really seem to be like developing them, and oftentimes ends up in death. This could be like the millions of like infant fatalities that happen in hospitals. This could be people who unalive in volcanic eruptions. This could be people who are infected by parasitic diseases that
Hey, Coco,
in fatality, all sorts of stuff like that.
can I lay out an analogy and see if you disagree or agree with it?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so
And like, say like there's this father, right? And he wants to teach his kid how to learn a bike. Or sorry, he wants to teach his kid how to ride a bike. So he has the kid riding down the street. And so now let's say by the end of this whole process, the kid ends up learning how to ride the bike. But it's not the case, that every single time the kid fell or that the kid was hurt, it actually led to some greater good. But it was still a part of the process, and the holistic picture or the end goal was still met. The kid learned how to ride the bike. Would you say the dad is unjustified in letting those falls happen because there wasn't some necessary greater good that came from them in that situation?
Can I ask a clarifying question before you answer that, Coco?
Wait, actually, I would like to actually answer it.
Wait, but I want to ask a clarifying question because it's gonna affect your answer when I ask it.
Actually,
All right. So,
let me
Let
Kason,
Coco answer.
Kason,
well, let me
is
answer
there
that,
any
and
other
then,
way?
or
Is there
hold on.
any other way for Coco? Believe me, it's going to help your answer. I mean, it's going to help you. It's going to help your answer.
I'm actually like really prepared for this. I've gotten this before, but like I'll answer.
Trust Coco.
I'll answer
All right.
again.
I guarantee you're not going to ask what I'm about to ask.
Okay, so
This happened another way.
okay, so like understandably, like I've heard this metaphor before, and like yeah, I would say that the father is not unjust in like allowing his kid to fall, because eventually like they end up learning how to ride the bike, and like it makes them stronger, and this is character development, right? But in God's case, God knows future propositions, and if we were to put like everybody in this bike scenario, he knows that there are some people who are never going to develop in character and are never going to
You're missing the
ride
point.
Yeah, it didn't
ride the
co.
bike.
You're missing the
So
point. So
Again,
God knows the full
See,
picture, which is why he knows the end goal, and he knows the end goal is still going to succumb. The kid's still going to learn to ride the bike, which is why he still lets the particular instances happen, even though there's not some necessary tie to a greater good in that particular instance. He still lets it happen, though, because the greater good, the kid learning the bike or learning to ride the bike actually ends up happening. So yeah,
yeah,
that's fine.
but like,
okay,
but there are,
Kason,
hold
Kason,
on,
is there
hold on.
another way for the kid to learn how to
Stop.
ride the bike
I already said yeah.
doesn't include suffering?
I already said yeah.
So why wouldn't the father
Jay,
just
hold up,
go
hold
Well,
with
up.
you
that
guys are just
instead
missing
of
the point
going
of
with the
this analogy.
suffering?
The point that's not the point of this
No, I
analogy.
get the point. I get the point of the
What's the
analogy.
point?
The point of the analogy is to show like the father knows that the kid is going to go through some suffering to learn how to ride the bike, and that he's not unjust in his approach to teaching the kid how to ride the bike that includes the suffering. But I would say that the
Not quite.
father is unjust if the father knows that there is a easier way for the child to learn to ride the bike without the suffering included
Wait.
in
Okay,
it.
wait. Hold on.
Easier may
Wait,
not be
hold on.
better.
I kind of want to. I wanted to take this. Like, I wanted to because like I think I got this.
Well,
So
let me actually like make my point clear, because you guys are like going after things that I'm not even here to address. My point is there are different ways an action can be justified, and it's not necessarily the case that an action is only justified is if there's some necessary greater good that's specifically tied to that particular action. Like I gave you the case
correct.
where like there's some end goal and the end goal still met. The particular actions at hand didn't have some necessary tie to a greater good, but the end goal was still met. They still contributed to the end goal, even though they didn't have to tie to a greater good. I'm just showing that there's different forms of what justification for an action even is,
okay,
or
so
how
like,
one can be justified in allowing something.
okay, so when it comes to your metaphor, like understandably, yeah, there are going to be like certain kids that end up riding the bike, right? But like then I would argue, I mean, and I would argue in that case that like yeah, maybe like it is like justified to allow like the kid to like fall off the bike because eventually they end up growing and becoming like a stronger and better version of themselves. But the thing is that God also knows like all future propositions, and he knows that there are some kids that are going to fall and never learn how to ride the bike. And God could have made maybe their struggles a little bit less. Maybe God could have given them a different task, like to play basketball instead, given them a different life rather, maybe soften up the task, and done something in this, knowing that this
You
kid
confuse me.
ride the
So
bike.
do you
But
do
instead,
you
like God, like allows this kid to like spend their entire lives like falling off the bike, never learning how to ride the bike, and eventually unaliving, never riding the bike. And he knew the entire time and could have made it a little bit different for them.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll answer that. But I'm a little confused. do you want to stick to complaining about how God sets up the particular ways we exist and how that determines everything? Or do you want to move to the claim that God should, because he hasn't already set up the particular things and ways that we exist in order for everything to be how he pleases? Because it seems in one sense you'll complain about that, but in one sense you won't. You'll like desire for it almost in the Christian view.
Well, I guess like the question I'm just asking is like, I mean,
I know the question you're asking.
I mean, like, does that seem like a God like I would worship, right? Like a God who knows that like
I don't
somebody
care if it's a God you would worship.
Well, like that's kind of the point, right?
No,
Like,
the point is whether or not the God is real.
well, like no, the point is whether or not the God is worthy of like my worship, or whether
I don't
it's
give a shit what like you consider worthy of your worship. I don't care if I show you God is real. I don't care if you sit there and blabber about whether or not you want to worship him.
Well, like my issue is going to be like God is not really good. This God's
That's
not really loving.
I guess
and,
that
this God
particular
is
issue
probably
wouldn't
not-
matter to me. Like, yeah, okay, that, God isn't good. We can address that. I don't care about your considerations on would you worship a God or not, If you want to claim that if you can show God isn't good, then God isn't real, or this particular model of God isn't real, then that's fine. Yeah, we can go for that. But I don't care if you would worship God or not.
Okay, so
Coco,
like, what's
I
the
was going to
point?
use that same analogy. Do you think the father's unloving for allowing the kid to take the risk of falling when he's riding the bike?
I would say like if like let's say the father had like two kids, right? And like I would say if the father saw that one kid was going to fall off the bike repeated times, but then eventually learn how to ride the
No,
bike
no.
and
You answer my question. If the just however many kids, if they fall off the bike, do you think it's unloving for God to allow the kid to have the risk of falling off the bike? It's part of
well, yeah.
allowing him the freedom to learn how to ride the bike, and maybe even from falling, he learns something, you know, else besides just riding the bike. Is God unloving for allowing that, or
Yeah,
Father unloving?
so
Is
like there's
Father
gonna be
unloving?
well, yeah, so like the answer to that question, there's gonna be like two scenarios, right? There's one scenario where the kid learns how to ride the bike after all of this falling, right? And God sees that future proposition before the kid gets on the bike the first time, and he's sort of just in allowing the kid to fall over and over again because it will lead to the kid like growing, right? But you have another case where the kid is falling off the bike repeatedly over and over and over again, suffering his entire life, and he never learns how to ride the bike. And God knows that he's never going to learn. And so God is sitting and watching this kid suffer and is doing nothing to help this kid to learn how to ride the bike. And he'd rather just sit and watch them fall over and over again, suffer in trial, and do something that they will never be able to do and pass away. And like, if we were to bring this into a realistic kind of example, right? God watches people who struggle with like schmudicidal thoughts, right? And he knows that these people are going to like unalive themselves and they're not going to grow from it or, gain some kind of character growth. And instead of coming down and helping them like a father who loves their kids would, right? And he knows that this struggle is too much for this person to bear. Instead, God sits aside and watches them suffer their entire lives. And then, next thing you know, this person is putting a schmistel in their mouth and pulling the trigger, and God watches all of that happen with no interference. I don't think that's something that a loving
Even
God.
even those instances that you just mentioned can contribute to overall saint development in the bigger picture, Co.
How
So
so?
you've not made an argument.
Wait, how so? How does God sitting aside and doing nothing while someone who's struggling with schmenicide lives their life suffering from this, and God doesn't lighten the load at all, and then eventually that person at the end of their life puts a schmistel in their mouth and pulls the trigger? How is that developing sainthood in any way?
Yeah, those are tied to things that we can work out as as humanity.
So
Things are
like,
not so
so
easy. Despite the problems, we still have faith in the Lord, and
So,
that
essen-
is
so essentially, like God has some human beings who are collateral damage for other human beings to grow in their character, but
could
some
be,
human beings are gonna like unalive, and God's not gonna help them, and it's for other people to gain
definitely could
character
be.
development.
And there's what's your argument against that?
That's not being all loving. Having
Well,
some
what's the
having
argument
some of
there?
your kids be collateral damage, and they have too much to bear, and you do nothing to lighten the load, and they unalive so other kids can be better and achieve greatness. That's not
Well, it
all
also
loving.
depends what the afterlife would look like, right? But
If
even
they
then,
even get
you'd have to substantiate your point here. I mean,
do
you're
you
just
think
reaffirming
there
your claim. You're just reaffirming your claim.
do you think
And
there
Coco,
are
if you're the father and you let the child fall off the bike and he scrapes his knee or he gets hurt, Because you didn't stop it, does that mean you're unmoved, or you don't care, you don't have compassion for your own son, Coco?
I think actions define somebody's inner thoughts or inner dispositions. I would say that if you love somebody and you see them struggling and you know that they're never gonna
But what
grow
about
from
the
this,
bike example? If you let your kid fall off the bike, it means you don't care that he scraped his knee?
if if I was a god and I had a kid who was riding on a bike and I knew that them falling off the bike was going to lead to them learning how to ride the bike and I let them fall, that's not necessarily an indicator that I don't care. Of course, I would allow
Thank
the
you.
suffering
There you
because
go.
it's beneficial,
Doesn't mean he's unmoved because he
but
allows evil or
no,
suffering.
but here's the thing. If I'm a god and I have a kid that's falling off the bike and he's never going to learn how to ride the bike, and I sit aside and allow this to happen with all of the power to make this burden a little bit
What
lighter,
if he learns
um,
perseverance,
that would
Coco?
be
What if
like
it's
unloving.
more than riding the bike? What if it's perseverance, not quitting, all
Tell
these
me,
other
tell me how somebody who
character
commits
qualities?
tell me tell me how somebody who commits shmenicide and pops themselves in the head is learning perseverance by struggling with shmenicide their entire life.
I was talking about the example on the bike.
But
I
like if
mean, you're
You
talking
learn
about
from that, Co. Other humans, humanity at
exactly.
if I
large,
make
learn
it a
from that.
reductio, right, I don't think that someone struggling with shmenicide and eventually like popping themselves in the head is like doing any like character development or like learning any perseverance
So
or
what would that world look like? God would stop everyone that considers that, as well as why would he stop there? Wouldn't he have to stop
Right.
well,
all evil acts?
it's not even that. I don't think God has to stop it, right? God could provide aid, which he doesn't, right? You
What if
like
he provides aid and the person does it anyway? People do what they want to do. They have
um
freedom.
well, I mean, then again, like if God did try to help people and like people ended up like making the choices that they make, then I mean, you can make an argument that like God is loving and he did what he could and like this was like out of his hands, right? But for God to like stay silent and uninvolved while people suffer and he has all the ability to lighten the load,
Do
that
you think if his
seems like
Christian
being a little bit
friends reached
unloving.
out to him and tried to help him, that motivated by God, that God's not reaching out to him and trying to help in that way?
Well, I think that's just like post hoc, right? Like you believe that God exists and so you equate like people helping somebody
Well,
to
post
God.
hoc is saying God did nothing and that nothing is gained from it and that no, he never tried to do anything. I don't know what your argument is that God didn't have any influence through other people.
Well, I mean, like saying that people did it isn't really like there's no symmetry breaker between that, right? Like it could be that these people were inspired or moved by God and God is like somehow like interacting with that, but it could also just be the case that like this is explained by naturalism. People can be nice and help people. It doesn't mean that God is necessarily involved in those scenarios. Right. So I don't see the symmetry breaker between like whether it's naturalism or whether it's like God
We
actually.
weren't arguing naturalism versus theism in that situation. We were
Well,
just
yeah, but
saying,
like, what's the
could God
symmetry?
have done something through Christians to reach out to the person or his family
Yeah,
or
but
anybody?
how do
But
you verify
earlier
that?
you did admit, I just want to make sure I understood, that you're the father, kid falls off the bike, Cason's example. You may have compassion even though you allowed it. Doesn't mean you were unmoved. You have other examples where you think that's a problem, but in that particular example, not stopping it doesn't mean you don't care, don't have compassion, you're not unmoved, right?
Well,
And
actually,
our analogy is we take that to God as well.
oh yeah, I would say to clarify, under that example that you brought earlier, a father allowing suffering that would be beneficial to their kid and does eventually lead to them becoming better, doesn't mean that they're unloving. But a father that allows harm to be done to their kid that is not beneficial to their kid, and he knows that it's not going to lead to them growing or becoming better, that father would be
Well,
unloving, and God does that all the time.
do you think the example I gave fits the first like definition or example you just stated?
I would say, yeah, like, so there is like a flaw in arguing suffering amongst human beings. Yeah, like there is going to be some suffering that does lead to character development and people
No, I'm
becoming.
just saying in like the father analogy. Like, are you saying that like that one's okay and he's not, he's not bad for not stopping the child because it led to him learning to ride the bike?
Yeah, I would say in that scenario, like,
Well,
yeah,
that's
like
the
child would
in
be.
that example, it's stipulated that not all the falls lead to any improvement on him learning to ride the bike. He just falls for the hell of it.
Yeah, but the conclusion is that he ends up learning how to ride the bike, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah, but
what's the
so
difference
like
in
so
that
Yeah,
What's the
so like, what
difference?
about the people who like never end up learning how to ride the bike, and God knows that this is going to happen, and He's just sitting here and watching an inevitable suffering of an entire life and no growth, no gain, no getting to the conclusion.
Well, that
Do
just
you,
if you're just assuming that there's no one that ever ends up riding the bike, well, the
Well, no,
riding the bike would need to be analogous to something because the riding the bike is the end goal, which
no,
should be
no,
analogous to
it's not
God's
that.
end goal. So you're stating that God's end goal wouldn't come about.
No, it's not that nobody ends up riding the bike. It's that some end up
There
riding
you
the bike,
go.
and
Yep.
God is justified in allowing it. But some people don't end up riding the bike, and God could have tasked them with a different task, or lessened it a little bit, or stepped in to help a little bit, right?
I'm not. I'm.
I
do
think
you,
he's just arguing
I'm
the
not sure
degree of
what you're saying.
suffering. Yeah, Kaysen did a really good job just explaining that. Like, if he repeats it, you'll see it crystal
No,
clearly
so
that
like,
your argument doesn't hold.
so let's say there are two individuals, right?
mhm.
Both these individuals are born blind, right? And like one individual, they're born blind, and like their life sucks, and like this is something that they're really struggling with. But through this blindness, they end up like curing cancer, making the world a better place, and engaging in a lot of humanitarian projects, right? I could say that in that sense, God allowed them to be blind, and He knew that they were going to develop and become this amazing person and change the world. And this blindness was something that was needed to build character. In that sense, allowing the blindness would be not necessarily a bad thing. Like, whenever you're working out, you feel like pain in your muscles, so some of that pain is like good because it's going to build character, and yada yada yada. But in the other example, God has somebody who's born blind, and they go their entire life suffering, and they end up at the end of their life committing shmenicide, and they stick like a pew pew in their mouth and pull the trigger, right? And God knows that this person is not going to grow from this. He knows that this burden is too heavy, and yet He doesn't step in to help. He doesn't lighten the load. He just allows this to happen. Um,
Presumably,
that
he's
in,
still justified in allowing that to happen if his end goal still comes about.
Right.
Because there's not need like we already said, there doesn't need to be a necessary tie to that particular evil in order for that evil to be justified.
wait, but
So,
how did the
yeah.
end goal come about in that scenario where the person didn't achieve sainthood or grow in
Well, it
character?
depends on what your end goal is and like what your eschatological view on hell is. If you're a universalist, you're going to think the end goal is that everyone goes to heaven. So, regardless of the suffering that person faced, they're still going to be able to endorse their lives in some particular way at the end of it. Maybe whenever they enter heaven, they endorse their lives on the holistic view, regardless of the so and so, like, or quote unquote unnecessary suffering. Or if you take like a more nuanced, or I guess not more nuanced, but just like a different view of hell, like eternal conscious torment, annihilationism, which I'm the most sympathetic to. You could give like there's different like views on like existential clarity or just like people still in being able to endorse their lives in the whole, regardless of whether or not they're going to heaven. There's like plenty of views like that.
I think.
That just depends on what God's end goal is.
Mhm.
So the end
I
goal for
think.
some is
I
character development and making it to heaven, and the end goal for others is they don't develop character, but at least they made it to heaven, and that's not even guaranteed. That's like based
And I
off of like
think
one of the
Kaysen was
main
pointing out
Christian views.
not every fall from the bike was being necessarily a benefit, but overall that's the case for the child and as far as mankind goes.
Well, no, like that's not what I'm worried about, right? Like what I'm worried about is like in one instance, the end goal for God is like the person developing character, but like in the instance where the person doesn't develop character, what necessarily is the end goal? And
well, I think
I guess you
you're.
could say heaven, but
I would say that you're viewing this from the perspective of like a personal gain, and that might not necessarily be the time. I remember we were talking a little earlier about how somebody could be used to help somebody else suffering, and that this could definitely be one of those situations. Like you might be going through something, and it might not necessarily benefit you, and it might not turn you into a better person, but through your suffering, you can help somebody else who might be going through that thing that you were once going through.
so do you think that somebody who chooses to unalive themselves, do you think that's like beneficial for like other people? Is that what you're saying?
No, 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 not in any way. What I'm saying is, like you might be viewing suffering as like you might be right. Maybe there might not be a goal by the end of it, but that could be used to help somebody else. If that, I don't know how to word that without sounding stupid.
So like for the person that like unalives themselves, like why didn't God lessen their load? What's the purpose of like allowing that to happen? Why didn't God step in, give them a pep talk? Why didn't God give them a hug, and
Well,
encouragement?
the thing about God and having faith in religion is that it all comes down to you reaching out your hand for that. And you know, God will sometimes meet you there, but you
Well,
have to
yeah. So
you
like,
have to take that first step.
well, yeah, yeah. So there are plenty of people who are religious who reached out to God, but then ended up like unaliving themselves. And like, God knew that all of this was going to happen prior to when it happens. I don't know if you subscribe to like B theory of time, when God, from God's point of view, the past, present, and future are all the same. But God knows that this is going to happen. This person's religious, reaching out to God. God doesn't like come down and help them in any way that we can measure empirically. God doesn't give them a hug or a pep talk. This person ends up unaliving themselves. Like, what's the purpose of that?
Coco, you've heard of Helen Keller, right? That's what Matthew's talking about, someone inspirational. But do you limit it, Coco, to unaliving themselves, or why would I just stop that or lessen low? Why wouldn't God stop someone from unaliving someone else or doing this or essay or across the board? Are you just focusing on that one thing, or are you talking about all evil acts?
Um, that's like one particular example that I think like is very, very effective. But like you guys are saying, like the goal is like character development, and
Saint
so like
development. It's
my
not character development because, well, even
okay,
then, right? There's goals. There's a goal that's not necessarily character development. There might be other goals, but this is fine and permissible for those goals for saint development. Even in instances he doesn't intervene.
okay, so like for saint development, so like if God's goal is for saint development, then I'm asking like what was God's goal in the instances where people did not develop into this sainthood?
They were there and they contribute to the whole plan. They play their role.
Okay, so you're saying that like someone else's suffering and demise contributes to the whole plan. So God has some humans who their purpose is simply to be collateral damage, so other people can develop, basically.
Hey, Coco. Sorry to
Again,
interrupt
it
you.
depends on what is our view of the afterlife. What is our view on that? How does that look? Are you making a fair judgment right now? I don't think we're in a position to make that judgment like you are.
Repeat that one more time.
So it comes down to the afterlife. Are we in a fair position to make a judgment on what that truly means, given the fact? And I don't think you're in a position to make that judgment yet. It seems like you're trying to.
Wait, how's it an answer to my question? Like I'm asking like, so are some people collateral damage for other people to like develop their character? And like, what was your answer to that?
Yeah, I said it could be very well, and it's your burden to show how that's incompatible or just whatever with the Christian God. You
Because
said we already had that
because
conversation.
that would mean that God is not all loving. For some people, He loves
Okay.
them, and wants them to
Why?
develop their character, and then for other people, He views them as collateral damage, as simply chess pieces that He moves in order to get other people to develop in their sainthood, but they're supposed to suffer and unalive. So essentially,
What's
like
the
God is.
contradiction,
So
Yeah,
Coco? What's the
I want your
contradiction
justification, right?
of
do you
God
think?
being
Do you
loving and
think?
he can't allow evil? What's the contradiction?
No, I'm just saying like. Um, I'm just saying like. Would it be loving of God to know that this evil is not beneficial for you and still allow it?
No, it
Talked
depends.
about that already.
Yeah, that's what Kaysen was telling you the whole time.
So like okay, so reductio. Um
What do you mean reductio? You agreed with the analogy. You agree with us.
wait, hold
Yes,
on.
You're about to reductio yourself.
Wait, no,
you
like I'm offering.
reductioed your own reductio.
No, I'm offering this reductio in the sense of
Christian.
um sorry, I'm getting a phone call.
Okay,
Um,
you're
I'm,
good.
I'm offering this reductio in the sense of if I have a toddler and like they're putting their hand in a fire and viciously burning themselves, and this is not beneficial to them whatsoever. This is actually detrimental to them, and I just like allow that to happen. And I know that this is not going to like be beneficial to them whatsoever. Am I a loving person for allowing that to happen?
Right, but wouldn't that grow you as a person?
Oh
You would
That
no.
take
doesn't matter.
preventative care now that you know that, hey, I
No,
don't want
no,
my toddler to go touch the fire again. And
no.
so it might not necessarily be building the toddler, but it would be forming that person into a better parent, wouldn't it?
No, that doesn't. My growth doesn't matter, right? But like, I have a toddler who's sticking their
But
hand
why
in
not? Why wouldn't your growth matter?
because like what we're questioning, right, is whether I'm loving for allowing my toddler to stick their hand in the fire and burn themselves viciously, and this is not beneficial to them whatsoever. This is not going to grow their character whatsoever.
Right, but now we're
Um,
talking about whether or not you would allow your toddler to put their hand in their fire, and now we're crossing over into the path of where we're talking about morality and kind of like what kind of person are you? Because I'm sure most adults and most sane parents aren't going to allow their child to put their hand
okay,
in their fire.
so what
So
if
can you change the layout? People are having a hard time reading their text, their
reading what?
chats.
Um,
And, you know, your responsibility, Coco, to help someone that's on the sidewalk that's hurt or being attacked or a toddler is different than God's responsibility overall. Being omniscient, all powerful, He's not just going to do the one thing. He's got to stop it all, really, if He's going to be
no,
like you're talking about. And that could completely change the balance of evidence and the dynamic of enough evidence to reject, enough evidence to accept. So it's not the same analogy for you as it is
well,
for him, I think, because he's aware of all evil.
well,
I've
no.
been listening. I've been
Wait,
listening for a while. Can I just ask a
hold on,
clarifying?
really quick. I was gonna address something. No,
Sure.
I guess like the question I want to ask Matthew is if you're a parent and you see that there's a harm that your child is going through that's not beneficial for them, would it be loving for you to allow your child to go through unbeneficial harm, just purposeless, meaningless, unbeneficial harm?
No, absolutely not. But
So
the
that's what I'm
child,
questioning. So
in
like
some
that's
way,
what I'm questioning
wouldn't
with
you
God.
agree that should a child touch a fire or harm themselves, wouldn't you agree that that would keep the child from doing it once more?
But what if that didn't keep the child from doing it once more? What if they kept putting their hand in the fire, they never grew from it, it wasn't beneficial, and they just unalived from the fire? And I knew that this was going to happen beforehand, and I just allowed it to happen. I didn't intervene at all. Would I be loving for doing that?
And it's a hard
So
ideology
like,
to
so
kind of.
like,
Wow.
yeah. So like that,
Wow. Dang.
Do you,
so that's how I see God, right? There
Mm-hmm.
are going to be some people who go through their trials and errors, and they're going to develop in their character, and like in that sense, God is loving because He's allowing them to, face these trials, and it's beneficial for that person to face these trials, and they're going to grow and become something great. But there are people who it's not going to be beneficial for them, right? God sits and watches this happen, and he doesn't talk to them, he doesn't hug them, he doesn't try to change their trajectory of life. He allows this person to go through this suffering, and he knows this suffering is not beneficial for them, and they end up unaliving. That God
so
is not
Coco, he
that
has
God's
to
not loving
stop.
people.
Coco, he has to stop all evil, then,
Well,
right?
no,
He has to
like
stop
no, you
all
keep
instances of
no,
suffering.
you
This
keep
Which
is
ones are you
saying
talking about?
this
you
is why
keep
I'm
saying that
desperate for a
you
clarifying
keep saying that
question.
I want God to stop evil. God could just lessen it, right?
Or suffering?
If it's so
How much does he
necessary.
lessen it before it satisfies you?
Okay, so somebody who's dealing with a mental disorder and they want to unalive themselves, God could come down and maybe like lessen
But
like their like unaliving thoughts, right?
but
But
your
it's a very
argument about
simple
pulling
thing.
the hand out of the flame, I mean, you really should stop every stabbing, stop every disease,
So
stop
wait,
anything
can your
anyone
God
doing
not do
No,
bad.
that?
like, but do
Can
you
your God
think
Then
not
that?
do
that
that?
world is not a real world anymore.
Well, no.
According
Dr. Truth,
to
do you think that we could live in a world with suffering, but suffering that's a little bit less than the suffering we have now? Like, we could live in a world where the only suffering that we have is stubbing our toe on a door. That could be a world. But you insist that the world we must live in is the world where women get raped, where people get stabbed, where car accidents happen, where drunk driving happens, where people unalive themselves due to bad thoughts. That is the world that must happen, and God is good for allowing this world. When He
We're
could have a world with
But
like
but
less
that's
suffering.
that's stepping into evil now, and you're talking more about
Well, no,
evil.
like all sorts of
And
suffering.
God
Evil.
isn't allowing of evil. Evil happens in the absence of
wait.
God.
So wait, how is he not allowing it? Wait, this is why I need a clarifying for I'm dying here. For the
Because
believers, hold on.
God's
I'm
given
asking
us
a clar.
free
Please,
will.
let me ask the clarifying.
Okay, before you ask your claim, like, could we have a world with one less grave, Dr. Shred?
Yeah, I mean, but it's
So
based on
like,
freedom, so that it could be also one more. I mean,
why
Is
the
can't
whole
God?
point is,
So why couldn't God
you've
create the
shown
world
no
with
kind. Hold on,
one less grave?
Coco, you just sort of running an emotional argument. You
No,
have
he's
not
not.
shown any contradiction between
No, he's not.
love, all power, and evil.
There is
He's
a
not.
And I've
contradiction.
already pointed out.
No.
If God has morally sufficient reasons, and then as Kason said, even horrendous evils, if we are in heaven, we can look back and see that it was worth it because of the incredible being
No.
and identifying with Christ's suffering. So Marilyn
No.
Adams wrote a book on that, which she
No.
totally explains that about horrendous evils.
No.
Okay, so
So you can't just pick out
Nope.
one thing and say
Disagree. No.
the whole world is a kindergarten world, is a toy
No.
world.
well, no. Like what I'm
It's
saying is
totally
like,
not a. I mean,
no,
No.
Coco, you're just need to lessen it a little bit.
you're breaking
Mike
up.
is lagging out.
Bars.
No, but I'm pretty sure like I pointed out the contradiction, right? Like I said, like, oh, hold on.
What was it? What was the contradiction? 'Cause I didn't hear it.
Is there a deity
Oh wait,
alongside on the
hold on.
properties?
Let me